Hey, it's Anthony Meisner with Land Title. Came to bring your Greater Metro Denver update for the month. Let's look at the entire year recap and just kind of see what happened. But as you can tell, the biggest change was inventory all year long. Now, you'd never know that if you looked at the year over year figures because we're only up 5.5% in active units of inventory in December. But what happened was a lot of inventory fell off the market in the latter 6 months. Usually our seasonality wouldn't dictate that inventory starts coming off because of frustrated sellers until maybe that October timeframe, but we started so early this year because we had so much inventory so fast. So caution as we go into next year is probably expect more of the same because a lot of sidelined frustrated sellers, you're going to see more of that repeat. Now, there's a few other big takeaways on here. November was kind of a weird off month, but we did see a big bump back up in closings in December. Under contracts, though, also suffered quite a bit. We are down 5% for the month, and the average sales price around this time also not looking good at 2.5% down. Now, that's the market as a whole. As we start to digest things, let's kind of look into inventory and talk about where that's happening, right? 72 units active on the market is not different from where we were a year ago, but that huge amount of expireds really played into this. Adams County is up 9% in active units. Jefferson being the one that really sticks out the most, up 22.5%. Now, if we look at places who had maybe a different experience, Arapahoe and Elbert County actually have less inventory on the market than they had this time last year, largely due to those frustrated sellers. Now, if we look at new inventory coming to market, clearly sellers are not confident about that time of year, December, right? We actually had 32% less listings month over month, which is very common, very normal seasonality as we get into December. You will start to see lots more listings come on the market in January, though. It's very seasonal, very normal trends. And if it has anything to do with last year, you're going to see a lot of listings in January because we way outpaced the normal market, listings coming on early in the January timeframe a year ago. And I can't imagine that this year's going to be a lot different with so many active sellers. Now, month supply of inventory. I want to break this down by detached and attached because just because we have lots of listings coming to market doesn't mean we have not enough for our buyers to look at, because with all those frustrated sellers, they pulled stuff off the market. Wouldn't believe this. We talk about an ample amount of sellers, but yet we only have 1.75 months of inventory on the market. And it gets way more extreme from there. Jefferson County, Broomfield County, Arapahoe County, even Douglas County and Denver County, way under 2 months of inventory. It's very, very tight, but it won't last for long, right? Because as sellers come back to market very rapidly, buyers are not going to gobble up all of that inventory every time it comes on the market. If you look at the attached market, a very different story. It's like complete opposite in so many ways. We're at 3.5 months of inventory. Yeah, the inventory dropped 25% in the last month, but that's 25 or 26% more than this time last year. And in places where you think you would normally purchase attached property, think Denver County, Jefferson County, over into Adams County, right? Way more inventory than you'd think. I mean, Jefferson County led it all with 40% more inventory year over year in attached. So this market is very, very difficult, and it is struggling for sure. Now, okay, let's talk about days in MLS. It's taking about 66 days on average to get a house under contract. That doesn't mean that all the houses are going to take a couple of months, but what it does mean is on the average, it is taking longer to sell this year than last year by about 15%. Shouldn't be any surprise with all this active or with all this more inventory on the market. We are going to continue to see this change. So look for that in the new year. Now, it looks like a horseshoe every year, being the fastest part of the market in that May or June timeframe almost all the time. So we might have one worse month with higher days in MLS, but after that, it will trend down and will get easier to sell homes. All right, so let's talk about the big picture. What's it happening macro in this market, right? Luxury, it looks like, has slowed down in the December month. We've seen 2 to 3 million down about 20% from this time a year ago, 3+ million, about 5% less sales, 1 to 2 million, about 9% less sales. But the bulk of the people who were borrowing, I mean, think 800 to a million, 9% more people going under contract. Same with the 400 to 500,000 mark. When money's cheaper, more people were shopping. I think this is probably a trend that's going to continue. If we look at it by month supply of inventory and days on market by price range, the interesting part is it didn't really matter what price range it was in. It just took a couple of months to get stuff under contract. So those days on market are higher. They have been much higher for a while in the detached, but The shortage of inventory is going to turn around quickly. It's just under 2 months, under 2 million, which really says a lot about confidence of sellers over the holidays. So that's really fascinating. The one number that you can really expect to skyrocket quickly is all the luxury numbers, because 5.5 months of inventory is about 10 months of inventory less than we had a few months ago. So that's a huge swing. Stuff's getting refreshed. People are going to put stuff back on the market. Definitely prepare for that. Now, if you look at the attached market numbers, same thing as we talked about earlier, 3.5 months of inventory on average across most of these price ranges. They are taking longer to go under contract, 70, 80 days in many of these things. Now, if you look at the 600,000 to 800,000 mark, though, it gives you some hope that there are definitely buyers out there looking at these properties. And as prices have come down a lot in this part of the market, it definitely has created some more affordability, even with the HOA rises. So be prepared for 2026 to be a little bit better year in the attached market than maybe we've seen in the years past. Now, this is why. Average sold price right here. So look at detached. It's been really relatively stable over the last 3 years, right? We kind of hit those peaks in 22. We've not quite gotten back to those numbers, but we've definitely stayed very stable. You can see the seasonality in the marketplace, but in all reality, it looks pretty decent. We're about $18,000 below where we were a year ago. Seems like an off December, nothing too crazy. So don't read into that too much. Most of the markets are sitting right there around zero. Douglas County seems to be the best at plus 1.8%. Somewhere like Broomfield County is really skewing the numbers, but not enough sales to really place into that one. Now, the attached market, this is what I'm talking about, that clear, slow erosion as HOAs skyrocketed and cost of money goes up. And they just all of a sudden were not an affordable product. So that affordability metric is really coming back into place, especially as you've seen major price cuts over that market in the last 3 years. It says year over year, we're down about 3%. I really would argue we probably felt a little bit more than that. Certain markets, though, definitely have done better than others. So keep your eye on that. It does seem like it's stabilizing a little bit, right? Because in 25, we've seen, those teetering numbers up and down, but this metric is starting to finally get it back into maybe in a more affordable range where you don't just go buy a detached home because the payment's the same, right? We're finally feeling that change in the attached market. Now, sold units, as far as detached is concerned, year over year, when we look back at the entire year to date, we're up about 2.6%. You can see that we had a couple of really good months, but mostly the same, right, across most of these markets. Now, Douglas County had 8% more sales, so they clearly are the winner in this. Jefferson County had 4% more sales. Very cool to see. But City of Denver actually was the slowest and went down about 1.2%. Nothing too crazy. Everything's very similar to a year ago. If we look at the attached market, this is where you really felt that contraction in the marketplace. Year to date, we were down 9.28%, almost 10% in total sold units. Now you can really see this in the outerlying markets, right? Broomfield down almost 19%, Denver down 15%, Douglas down 12%, Elbert County, not very many sales, so ignore that one. Adams County was down 5%, Arapahoe 5%, Jefferson 6%. So the attached market is definitely the harder part of this market, and that definitely could change as that affordability comes back. Now, percentage sold to list price, this one doesn't include concessions and it doesn't include price drops, but it does give you a bearing on, this year versus last year. Now we're down 0.2% year over year. So slightly more favored in the buyer's direction than it was a year ago. Again, you can always use the tables at the bottom if you want to look at it by price range with your buyers or sellers. If you have any other questions, concerns, reach out to me. I'm Anthony at Land Title. We have lots of other market data to help out with. Have a great day.